January 27th, 2022. Sitting in what I feel is, by health matrices, a collapsing part of the universe. Fabric of space and time has been warped in such a way that it's hard to breathe, it's hard to keep posture. The sunlight outside this window, my eyes keep changing colors, but in a whatever. So I've been making document about that. At the same time, I've been looking to see on the street and by the television what the humans are saying. And what concerns me is they mentioned something the other night that I've heard in passing, but I don't know what it really means, about lobbying. They showed a form. Then they showed something about a U.S. House of Representatives, but it was not, that's, again, I don't know, is that the House of Representatives now? Is that the military division or installation? Because the representative that was speaking did not look like a familial member to myself, but that's not unusual if there's some kind of like a United Nation type of a thing with multiple nations, which is concerning, because if that's where they're growing in numbers with lobbyists being of private sector and whatnot, I mean, again, who are these House of Representatives? Why does nobody know their names, where they come, where their home state is, where they've been transferred, and where they're broadcasting from? Like, why do we, as the civilians or the citizens of the ordinance, I mean, if I look at the bartering system, it has a familial look. There's a couple of different faces, and then there's a gigantic stone structure that they had some form of backing that they actually carved into the stone. So those two, in like a strip of solidarity, seem to be anchors of a truth. What is confusing, though, is why there's a capital that goes along. It's mentioned on the same paper. There's a thing that says Washington, D.C. There's President Joe Biden at the moment. What's confusing, though, is if that's the defense position to protect whatever's housed inside of this United States House of Representatives that have different positions or whatever, there's something called a White House that's really clear on definition of what the family estate should look like in familial whatever planning, genealogical planning, for safety for those of us that don't have Washington positions, or a place there. So now I'm in an outer state. But then it gets really confusing based on how things are being run and managed, because you almost feel like you're cut off from everything that you need to know. And then there's this new technology portion, which is really scary, that's been installed. In the local area, I don't know how these gigantic high cell towers, they switched from landlines. That's really frightening. And then there's been some installations locally of non-familial members calling themselves, one's calling itself a senator. I don't know how. Isn't that what the U.S. House of Representatives are for? What is the Senate? How does that work? And then there's been this, over the last several years, there's been this change of all of a sudden there was some non-family member who got into the White House and sat there for 8 years, planning and doing whatever he did. And now there's a different whatever look in the White House, supposedly. And then there's this thing with China. They came out with a movie. I saw the coming attraction last night, which I don't have history or what's transpired to know. I mean, to even protect myself from like inside, or even to find some form of making this so I can afford myself. And it gets really confusing, but it feels like if you have one defense position, it needs to stay strong with Joe Biden and that position, along with the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. But yet the judicial has an imperfection. I don't know what goes on or how legislative is rewired itself. But it feels like there's been a lot of distension almost amongst the ranks. I mean, from an outside perspective looking in, it looks like a sign of weakness, which is really scary considering on a global scale, there are some really strong, scary leaders out there. So I don't understand why one wouldn't want to keep the main position within their corridor in a solid. So now is that what the form of anarchy is when you go along with putting in weaker signs of weakness into your area? Because it's been a growing concern, and I don't know who to address this with. And it seems like the message on the teleportation device, I noticed this morning they put somebody up about the Holocaust. One of the first times I've heard of the Holocaust in years. But I hear a lot about some black movement, and along with, they even scheduled them on the calendar. And then now they have like a whole month. It's usually February. So this gets really confusing between lobbyists and this House of Representatives. And how do you get a list of what's in there so you can go through an interview or send some form of search and rescue party to figure this out in a familial sense?
Dawn has more on the big screen.
Now, this is this new movie, Unsilenced. See that face? It's a movie that they're just they're just coming out with. They premiered it. New York is one of the yellow states. I guess that's allowed to see this level of artistry. So that's been granted some kind of permission, and that was NTD News that alerted me to that. They had a preview of what a senator, a familial senator, said, and it was something about 1999, and he was shocked about the possibility of this going on since 1999 and him just finding out about it, being that he's a senator. You would think he would be in the know.
Green release.
Then, this is what really sparked my concern this morning, is this headline. Here are the headlines for this morning, which is January 27th.
I'm Mary Calvi. CBS Mornings is next. Have a great day.
Welcome to CBS Mornings on this Thursday. I'm Gail King.
I'm Tony Nicole. And I'm Nate Burleson.
We're all here. Let's go.
All right. You see the date up here? She's announcing herself as a king on this broadcast, which is a concern considering it's taking place in New York City, which is within the Atlantic to Pacific coast. Just want to make a note on that, and now listen to what the message is.
Let's go to today's eye-opener. It's your world in 90 seconds. Justice Stephen Breyer is retiring. See who President Biden could pick to replace him on the nation's highest court.
The president has stated and reiterated his commitment to nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court.
A black woman to the Supreme Court. At what point can there be like brakes put and say, we've gone through it feels like a staged coup attempt, and it's coming from multiple angles at this point. It's coming fast and heavy. How do we slow and put some brakes down on this? And how do we structure and reorganize from a founding father's perspective with some familial members before more of this goes on and then makes us look like a weak nation? Just curious, since the word nation gets to be confusing, especially since where I am in New York City, it looks like a bunch of nations lost their children in New York, and now they've got some kind of voice in some kind of survey, and they've been painting the town in, and it doesn't look like they even have a moderator or director or a box office of some sort to take suggestions and complaints to then feed it into the chain of command. So this way it's structured and organized properly to help slow down and break some of these really changing characteristics that may put us further in danger.
Where COVID means the National Guard is helping out in classrooms.
So now the National Guard, this kind of guard, which is non-familial and non-ancestral, according to Mount Rushmore, which is the statues of the four founding fathers. They're here. They're inside of the schools talking to the children, and they're also inside of the hospitals. At what point does someone look at this and say, there are larger changes on surface, real world life? Like when I walk up to my son's elementary school, this look is what's in his classroom, and he looks like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer compared to the other deer inside of the classroom. Like there's a noticeable difference. And I'm not quite sure how overnight this got dropped off on the doorstep and became the new normal and natural. And there's like no way or there's no place to voice one's concern safely in the local area because the police has a mixed look like this. And I don't know what lobbyist they work with within their chain of command. Lobbyists are those, they file some declaration within their tax returns. They should be easy to find because they take corporate money and corporate sponsorship and push some board of directorship momentum and agendas, which if that's the piece that's throwing off the safety structure for our local area, how does one investigate that safely? And also, how does one protect themselves and their children and their future from that level of power coming after you? I mean, you need more than just one person, especially in a collapsing, outside of that, the sun is way too high on UV ray. There's some stuff going on in the city that's compromising health. There's something called global warming right now, where the volcanoes are going off, and you have melting ice caps. It's the planet is out of alignment. That's the most serious issue. But that's not even being addressed at where it needs to be. And then that, second to that, is the faces of ordinance, what's set in stone and in paper that you keep in your pocket so you know what area or what territory this is. The land folk seem to be changing. How does one report that, keep oneself safe, and not have these dangerous characters try to take action or motion to hurt me? How does one actually do that for the safety? Because I'm not the only one that it would protect. I just seem to be the only one that I am aware of that sees a growing concern, but from multiple different angles, and has an anchor in order to voice backwards going, this is not right. I know that there was a man who had a dream that they put on a calendar, but there was mass and ordinance and structure before that man had his dream of anarchy and of taking down the 3 branches of stability in this area that looks over other important things, that if there was a stage coup going on in that level of governance, my level of human would be at such a disadvantage, because they're not even coming to hire us in order to bring us into a conversation or into a U.S. House of Representatives. I don't even know if I'm represented in the U.S. House of Representatives, because the only face I've seen is non-familial. So that gets really confusing, and I don't know how one or where one goes in order to even start an inquiry or to inquire about who to involve to do this safely. And this is almost like, this is part of like a tidal wave came, and now it's the receding of the tsunami waters in some kind of like a rip current, is what it feels like. It's year 2022. And it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It is Earth, solar system, Milky Way universe. Galaxy is broken.